Glaucoma can lead to blindness in some people. Researchers are still learning why some people get the progressive disease and some don't. Marty Salt puts your family first with a new clue that might surprise you.
Eye pain, headaches, and blurred vision. A few symptoms of glaucoma, the disease that causes pressure to build up behind the eye, progressively leading to vision loss and even blindness. It affects 80 million people worldwide.
We know that age is a risk factor for many chronic medical conditions,
including glaucoma. But a new UK study has uncovered something surprising. They found that participants with more good cholesterol actually had an increased risk of developing glaucoma. They were 10% more likely to develop the eye condition, while the people with higher levels of bad cholesterol have an 8% reduced risk.
Once the damage happens, it's irreversible.
Future clinical trials are needed to confirm the findings, but medical professionals say knowing this possible link between cholesterol and glaucoma can help encourage earlier eye screenings.
I think anybody with a family history of glaucoma should definitely get an annual exam and get worked up for glaucoma, and anybody over the age of 40 years should get an annual eye exam done by an ophthalmologist.
You can reduce cholesterol through medications or diet changes, such as reducing saturated fats like red meat and increasing soluble fiber by incorporating more omega-3 foods like salmon and walnuts.
It's important to eat healthy and stay physically and mentally active.
Marty Salt, WGEM News.